The town of Ironwell had been dying for 30 years, but it was taking its time about it. Its heart, the old railroad yard, was a sprawling graveyard of rust and memory. Hulking skeletons of steam engines sat on buckled tracks, their boilers cold, their whistles silent. The great roundhouse was a cathedral of decay, its roof open to the sky, the air inside thick with the smell of iron oxide and forgotten ambitions. For most, it was a blight, a reminder of a prosperity that had steamed away towards brighter futures. For Alara, it was a sanctuary. She was the town's archivist, a title that felt too grand for the dusty, one-room library she tended. Her real work, however, was in the yard. With a camera whose shutter clicked like a gentle bone, she documented the decline. She wasn't interested in the grandeur of what had been. She was obsessed with the quiet beauty of the end. The way morning frost traced the elegant curves of a coupling rod, the delicate, lace-like patterns of rust on a tender's side. The tenacious dandelions pushing through the cinder ballast. The townsfolk tolerated her. They saw her as a harmless eccentric, the rust girl, forever clambering over dangerous ruins with her camera. They didn't understand that she was collecting ghosts, piecing together the story of Ironwell's long, slow sigh. Her ritual was unchanging. Every evening, as the sun bled orange over the western hills, she would develop her photographs in the library's small darkroom. The chemical baths smelled of vinegar and fixer, and in the red glow of the safe light, the images would swim into existence on the paper, glimpses of a world surrendering to time. One Tuesday, she was developing a shot she'd taken inside the roundhouse, focusing on the intricate gears of a turntable mechanism. As the image clarified in the tray, she froze. There, in the deep shadow cast by a giant drive wheel, was a figure. It was faint, translucent, but unmistakably human. A man in coveralls and a newsboy cap, his form seeming to be woven from the dust motes and shadows themselves. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at the gears, his hand resting on them with a kind of weary affection. Alara's heart hammered. A trick of the light, a double exposure. It had to be, but the negative was clean. She had taken only that one shot. The next day she went back to the exact spot, her camera feeling heavier than usual. The roundhouse was empty, silent but for the wind whistling through broken windows. She took the same photograph. That evening, in the red darkroom glow, the figure was there again, in the same pose. But this time, when she peered closer, she saw his face was turned slightly more towards the camera, his expression not one of sadness, but of profound focus. A slow, cold thrill crept up her spine. She wasn't just photographing decay. She was photographing an echo. She began to search the archives with a new purpose, pulling out payroll ledgers, maintenance logs, and crew manifests from the yard's final years. She cross-referenced the location in the roundhouse with old work schedules. Her eyes fell on a name, again and again, associated with that specific turntable, Finn O'Malley, master mechanic. The log described him as a whisperer, a man who could diagnose an engine's ailment by the sound of its steam, who treated the great machines not as iron beasts, but as living, breathing entities. The last entry for Finn O'Malley was dated October 17, 1953, the day the yard was officially scheduled for closure. The note was brief, written by the foreman. O'Malley refused to leave his post, said the 407 needed a final adjustment, found him later at his station. Gone. Heart, they say. He had died the day the music stopped. He had never left. Alara returned to the yard, not with the detached eye of a documentarian, but with the reverence of a pilgrim. She no longer saw ruins, she saw a mausoleum for a man's life's work. She started talking to the silence. "Hello, Finn," she'd say, her voice small against the vastness. "The light on the 307's pistons was beautiful today." She would tell him about her photographs, about the town's slow fade, as if updating a colleague. She began to find things. Small, subtle changes. A wrench, polished and laid neatly on a workbench she knew had been covered in grime the day before. A stray rivet placed perfectly in the center of an anvil. One morning, she found a single, fresh wildflower, its stem carefully tucked into the hinge of a switchbox. The photographs became a conversation. She would take a picture of a beautifully corroded valve, and in the developed print, Finn's shadow would be there, pointing to a hairline crack she had missed. She was no longer just capturing the end. She was being shown how it should be remembered. He was guiding her, teaching her to see the yard not as a corpse, but as a patient in a deep, eternal sleep. The crisis came when a development company from the city finally purchased the land. The plan was to scrap the metal and flatten the yard for a sprawling logistics warehouse. The town, desperate for jobs and tax revenue, voted yes. The bulldozers were scheduled to arrive in a month. For Alara, it wasn't just the destruction of a historical site, it was a desecration. It was the final erasure of Finn O'Malley. She fought. She presented her photographs to the town council, talking of history and heritage. They saw only rust and ruin. She spoke of Finn, and they saw a ghost story. She was a voice crying out in a pragmatic wilderness. On the eve of the demolition, she went to the roundhouse one last time. The air was thick with the threat of rain. She set up her camera, her movements slow with defeat. "I'm sorry, Finn," she whispered into the cavernous space. "I tried." She took a final photograph of the turntable gears. As the shutter clicked, a strange certainty settled over her. She didn't go to the darkroom. Instead, she gathered every photograph she had ever taken of the yard, every one that held Finn's faint, guiding presence. She worked through the night, arranging them not chronologically, but narratively. A portrait of a love affair between a man and his machines. The final image was the one she had just taken. As dawn broke, she pinned the entire exhibition to the boarded-up windows of the library, a public gallery for a town on its way to tear its past down. The people of Ironwell, on their way to work, stopped and stared. They didn't see rust. They saw the elegant geometry of a drive shaft captured in perfect morning light. They saw the gentle hand of a ghost on a lever. They saw the soul of the place they had dismissed as a junkyard. They saw Finn O'Malley, not as a spook, but as a craftsman, forever tending his charge. A quiet crowd gathered. Old men who had worked the lines pointed with trembling fingers, their eyes wet. "That's the 407, one muttered. "My dad fired that engine." They weren't looking at ruins anymore. They were looking at their own fathers, their own youth. The bulldozers arrived at 8, but they found their way blocked, not by a barricade, but by the people of Ironwell. The town that had voted for progress was now standing, silent and resolute, in defense of a ghost. The project was delayed, then it was canceled. The yard was never restored. The engines didn't steam back to life, but they were left to their dignified sleep. The town found a new, quieter identity, drawing artists and historians, all because of the photographs of the Ironwell ghost. Alara still walks the yard. The shadows are longer now, the rust a little deeper. But she is never alone. She has learned that some places are not just made of brick and steel, but of memory and love. And sometimes, if you listen closely and see with the right kind of eyes, the past doesn't haunt you. It keeps you company. The shadows of the railroad town were not specters of fear, but guardians of a legacy, and Alara, the rust girl, had become their chosen scribe.